The bottle tipped and rolled across the crooked floorboards, half full but forgotten. He did. T reach for it. His hand went for her instead. Clara tried to step back, but the wall pressed cold against her spine. There was nowhere left to move. His grip came hard, too quick, like a rattlesnake strike. The fancy dress her father had forced her into split down the shoulder seam with a sharp tear, and the man grinned as if she were something owed, a payment collected. Her father's gambling had finally caught up to him, and Clara, she was the debt. She didn't scream. She knew it wouldn't matter. No one in that house would hear, not in the upstairs bedroom of the man she'd just been forced to marry. Some men wear polished boots and sign land deeds and believe that makes them better, but none of it means a damn thing when a man's heart is rotten and his hands are trained to hurt. That night something was stolen from Clara, something she'd never get back. And worse than the loss was the weight it left inside her. A weight she'd carry for the rest of her days. But what happens when that weight begins to grow? How do you love yourself when the darkest part of your past beats inside you like a second heartbeat? It was barely dawn when Marshall Hayes heard the knock. Except it did sound like a knock, more like something weak and tired collapsing against his door. Soft, uneven, hesitant, almost like the wind itself had gathered enough courage to ask for help. Hayes pulled the door open with one hand, the other wrapped around an old shotgun that hadn't fired since the war back in '76. He wasn't ready for what he saw. A girl, barefoot, hair tangled and wild. Blood dried, thick along the side of her neck. She wore nothing but a dirty bed sheet, clutched tight as a shield. Her skin was streaked with bruises and scratches, but it was her eyes that froze him. Vacant, hollow, and yet sharp, like a coyote that had been hunted too long and had finally stopped running only because there was no ground left. Hayes did ask a single question. He just shrugged off his coat and held it out. She hesitated before wrapping it around her thin frame. Her hands shook, but her voice did I ain't clean, she whispered. Hayes did flinch. Did not either. He just turned and pointed toward the small tack room at the back of the house. She walked as though every bone in her body might give out at any step. He poured water, set a kettle on the fire. Not a word between them, but in his gut, Hayes knew this one's just some lost girl wandering. This was a wound cut by a man who held power. The kind of man who believed laws were meant for others. Hayes had seen that kind before. He fought them in the war, fought them in saloons, and fought them right in his own town. And now maybe, just maybe, that fight had found its way to his front porch again. As the sun rose over the New Mexico desert, Hayes sat silent on his porch, boots dusted, arms folded. The shotgun leaned against the wall behind him. He didn't know the girl's name yet. Didn't need to. Whoever she was, someone would come looking. And when they did, they might have picked the wrong ranch. She hadn't been inside 10 minutes before the trouble arrived. Hayes had just set the kettle on when his dog started barking, not in panic, just a low growl, a warning. He stepped outside. The morning sun was barely above the horizon, heat already rising in waves off the dirt. Down the trail came a rider, fast and heavy. Dust cloud chasing each hoofbeat. Hayes did move, just watched. The man pulled up quick. Big frame. A scar split down his cheek. A revolver on his hip worn from use. Girl came through here, he said flat. Blonde, barefoot, maybe wrapped in a sheet. Hayes narrowed his eyes like he was staring at the sun. Lose your mind already this morning? The rider did smile. She belongs to Mr. Durnell. Ran off before sunrise. She, his wife now. Papers signed. I am here to bring her home. Hayes walked over to the well, filled a bucket, let the water splash slow. You see a girl barefoot and bloodied, running through cactus and stone. You don't bring her home. You bring her help. That girl is covered in bruises, and the man she ran from ought to be ashamed to call himself anything but a coward. The rider's eyes sharpened. You sure you want to stand between Mr. Durnell and what is his? Hayes locked eyes. I am sure I ain't moving. Silence stretched, not the peaceful kind. The kind that cracks right before something breaks. But the rider did draw. Just smirked. A smirk that promised next time he would ride alone. He tipped his hat, turned his horse, and vanished down the trail. Hayes stood there watching. When he finally stepped back into the tack room, the girl hadn't moved, but her eyes followed him now, not wide with terror anymore, but measuring him, trying to see what sort of man she'd ended up with. He set bread beside her, walked out. Then, for the first time in years, he took the old rifle down off its hooks, because men like Durnell don't send just one dog. They come back louder, meaner, and they don't knock. That day Hayes didn't say much. He rarely did. The girl mostly stayed inside, didn't ask for anything, moved little, as though if she kept still enough the world might forget her. Hayes left food by the door. Sometimes she ate, sometimes not. But every so often she peeked out the window like the outside might reach in and drag her back. Around midday she stepped out into the sun. Hayes was fixing the gate. He did look up right away, but caught her in the corner of his eye. Still in his coat, still walking as though each step was pain. "Can I help?" she asked quietly. He handed her a hammer. "You know how to swing one?" She shook her head. "Well, you'll learn." It wasn't too much. A few nails, a squeaky hinge, but it was the first thing she'd done in weeks. That once, running, crying, or bracing for pain. And that mattered. Later, she sat beside him under the porch roof. Didn't talk. Just watched chickens scratch and dust roll. After a while, she pointed at the horizon. "You think he'll come back?" Hayes did glance at her. "I'd bet my last boot on it." She nodded, like she already knew. But her hands weren't trembling anymore. Hayes noticed that. "Now look, if you've followed this far and your stomach is twisting the way mine did telling it don't walk away now, go ahead and tap that subscribe button, because you don't want to miss what happens when Durnell comes back. And you know he will. And when he does, it won't be quiet." They came just before sundown. 3 riders this time, dust boiling behind them like thunderclouds. Hayes spotted them from the porch. Did move, just rested one hand on the rifle by the door. Inside, Clara stood half hidden behind the curtain. She knew who it was. Durnell rode front and center, dressed too sharp for a man so foul. 2 hired guns flanked him, both built for trouble, smelling of whiskey and sweat. Durnell dismounted slow, peeled off his gloves like he was a senator, not a snake. "Heard you've been hiding my wife, Hayes." Hayes did blink. "Heard you been beating what don't belong to you." Durnell's grin collapsed. "That girl is mine. Signed paper. Law on my side." Hayes stepped down off the porch, calm as dawn. Law don't mean spit when a man's got no soul. The goons moved first. Always do. One rushed left, fast but foolish. Hayes pivoted, cracked him across the jaw with the rifle butt. The other drew iron, but Hayes was quicker. One shot. Center mass. Dust and silence. Durnell froze. Pale. Gloves dangling useless. Hayes walked up close, so close Durnell could feel the heat of his breath. "You listen good. If I ever see your boots touch this dirt again, I won't be firing to scare. I'll be digging your grave where you stand." Durnell did speak. Just back to his horse like a boy caught stealing. They rode off, tails tucked. When it was over, Clara stepped out. She wasn't afraid anymore. She looked free. For the first time in a long time, Hayes felt like something had been set right. A month passed. Quiet. No riders, no shadows, just long days fixing fences, quiet suppers on the porch. Clara smiled more. Not often, but real. Then one morning she didn't come for breakfast. Hayes knocked. No answer. When he pushed the door open, she sat on the edge of the cot, hands pressed to her stomach. She did cry. Did speak, but Hayes understood. Only one truth carried a look like that. He sat beside her, silent. "Finally," she whispered. "What do I do?" Hayes rubbed his hands, looked out the window. "You let it live." Her head turned startled. "Even if it's his, even then." He stood slow. "You ain't broken. You are starting again. That child don't carry his sin. Only yours, only what you give it." Her shoulders sagged, her face pressed into his chest. And Hayes held her like something worth keeping. From that day forward, there was no more hiding, no more silence. Hayes walked beside her into town, sat next to her in church, bought baby blankets from the same store Durnell once strutted into. Folks whispered. Folks always whisper. Hayes did care, because in a world where men toss others aside like scraps, he chose to hold on, even when it hurt, especially then. So let me ask you, could you do the same? Could you love what others call shame? Could you raise the child of the man who hurt her? Because sometimes being a man ain't about what you fight. It is about what you choose to keep. And if this story struck a chord inside you, don't leave it quiet. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and share this tale with someone who needs reminding. The strongest men are and Teat the ones who swing fists the hardest, but the ones who choose to protect what others would throw away.